Hidden passages. They're real and they've been used to hide people, move power, and keep the rest of us in the dark. So in this video, we're going to take a look at 20 of the most fascinating secret routes ever built. Starting with number 20, the Baddesley Clinton Sewer Priest Hole, England. Baddesley Clinton is a moated medieval manor house in Warwickshire that became a safe house for English Catholics during Elizabeth I's reign. Its owners and tenants in the late 16th century were committed Catholics at a time when harboring a priest was punishable by death, so the building was altered to include several priest holes, concealed spaces and passages designed to hide clergy during a raid. One of these is not just a cramped cavity inside of a wall, but a genuine hidden passage. Beneath the kitchen is a tunnel that began life as part of the medieval sewer system. When the house was being adapted as a refuge, the Jesuit carpenter Nicholas Owen, famous for his skill in building these holes, reworked his old drain into a concealed hiding place. Access was by an apparently ordinary privy on an upper floor. In an emergency, fugitives could lift a concealed panel, slide down a rope through the old guard-robe shaft, and land in a covered sewer beneath the west range of the house. Contemporary and modern descriptions agree that the tunnel runs the length of that side of the building and was big enough to shelter multiple people, along with their vestments and the equipment needed to say a mass. And estimates of capacity vary from around 6 to as many as a dozen people, so historians usually describe it more cautiously as being able to hide several priests at once. This system was put to the test in 1591 when priest hunters surrounded Baddesley Clinton during a Jesuit meeting. Accounts preserved by the National Trust and in later retelling state that at least 5 priests took refuge in the hides, including the sewer passage, while the house was searched for hours. The searchers didn't find anything. Only after Anne Vaux, the Catholic tenant, offered them breakfast and paid them for their trouble did they finally leave, and then the men emerged unharmed. Today, Baddesley Clinton is managed by the National Trust, and visitors can still see this entrance to the sewer priest hole beneath the kitchen and learn how the passage was adapted from a functional drain into a hidden escape route. The exact working details of every raid and hiding episode inevitably rely on later written accounts, but the physical passage, a repurposed sewer running under a house, is a very real secret route. Number 19. The Vasari Corridor in Italy. High above the streets of Florence in Italy, largely invisible unless you know where to look, is the Vasari Corridor. It's an enclosed elevated passage that links the city's centers of power. Built in 1565, it runs from the Palazzo Vecchio through the Uffizi complex, along the north bank of the Arno, and over the Ponte Vecchio before weaving across rooftops. Its length is usually given as around 750 meters to just under a kilometer, depending on how the route is measured. Duke Cosimo I de' Medici ordered the passage for a very practical reason. After replacing the Republic and centralizing power in his dynasty, he wanted a safe private way to move between the government seat at Palazzo Vecchio and the family residence at Palazzo Pitti without walking through crowded streets. Architect Giorgio Vasari designed the corridor, and the sources from modern and contemporary summaries agree that it was completed in just about 5 months to coincide with some wedding celebrations in 1565. The route itself is carefully threaded into the city. Leaving the Uffizi, the corridor runs above the Riverside Street, crosses the Arno on top of the Ponte Vecchio, and even detours around the existing tower because its owners refused to let it be altered. For centuries, the passage was a piece of political infrastructure used by Medici and their successors whenever they wanted to travel unobserved. In the 20th century, it gained a new role as part of the Uffizi's exhibition space, and during the Second World War, as a secure route to move artworks away from danger. Because of safety concerns, though, the corridor was closed in 2016 for major restoration and only reopened to the general public in December of 2024. Access is now through a timed, guided visit, but the route and purpose remain the same. It's an enclosed walkway, originally designed so Medici could move discreetly and securely above the city. Number 18. Passaggio di Borgo in Rome. Alright, we're gonna stay in Italy for this one. Running high along the old Vatican fortifications, the Passaggio di Borgo is an elevated walled passage that quietly links an apostolic palace to Castel Sant'Angelo. It was built in the late 13th century and generally attributed to Pope Nicholas III around the year 1277. From the street level, it kind of looks like an extension of the wall, but inside it's a narrow, covered walkway that allowed the Pope and his entourage to move between residence and fortress without being seen from the streets. It's a few hundred meters long, and it follows the line of Borgo district between St. Peter's and the Tiber River, and at one end, a discreet doorway within the Vatican leads into the corridor. At the other, openings within the ramparts of Castle Sant'Angelo gives access to the massive cylindrical fortress. The whole structure was designed to be defensible, of course. Small windows, thick masonry, and tight internal turns make it more of a protected escape tube than a walkway. In 1527, during the sack of Rome, troops of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V stormed the city, and they overran much of the papal territory. Pope Clement VII fled across the Passetto with members of his household while fighting raged in the streets below, reaching the castle, where he endured a siege. There are references to earlier popes using it, including Alexander VI during the late 15th century, but details before the 1500s are less well documented. In more recent centuries, it gradually lost its day-to-day political role, but it remains structurally intact, locked and guarded as part of Vatican state property. But what makes it a hidden passage is not that it was unknown. Romans were aware that some form of link existed, but that its entrances, inner layout, and use were tightly controlled and shielded from public view. As a piece of practical security architecture, it shows how medieval and Renaissance rulers were blending fortifications, urban planning, and secrecy to protect themselves while moving through their own capital. Number 17. Wartime tunnels under Dover Castle in England. Dover Castle. It sits on the chalk cliffs overlooking the English Channel, and beneath it lies a multi-level network of tunnels that functioned for years as a secret operational passage. Some of the earliest galleries were dug in the late 18th century when Britain feared a French invasion during the Napoleonic Wars. Soldiers were quartered in barrack tunnels that were carved into the chalk, hidden from enemy ships and protected from bombardment. By the 20th century, the Napoleonic tunnels had fallen into limited use, but the outbreak of the Second World War gave them a new purpose. In the late 1930s, they were extended and adapted to serve as underground command center, hospital, and communication hubs. Because everything was buried in the chalk, the complex was largely invisible from above and protected against air attack. The most famous use of the tunnels came during Operation Dynamo in May and June of 1940, when the British High Command organized the evacuation of Allied troops from Dunkirk. Admiral Bertram Ramsay directed the operation from within the Dover tunnels, using the protected passageways. War diaries and official reports from the time make clear that this underground complex was the nerve center for the effort. Although some local people knew that secret tunnels existed in the cliffs, the detailed plans and exact purpose of every room were not widely publicized until long after their wartime role had ended. Visitors can now follow guided routes through some of the wartime galleries, while other areas remain closed due to safety concerns. The sections that are open give a clear sense of how the tunnels worked as hidden passages, linking the medieval castles above with lookouts, communication points, and strategic positions in the cliffs. There are still technical details that aren't generally available, particularly later Cold War modifications, but the core facts about when the tunnels were dug and how they connect parts of the fortress and how they were used during key operations like Dunkirk are firmly grounded in surviving evidence. Number 16. The Cu Chi Tunnels in Vietnam. Northwest of central Ho Chi Minh City is one of the most extensive hidden passage systems of the 20th century, the Cu Chi Tunnels. This underground network dug into clay was built originally by anti-French resistance fighters in the late 1940s and massively expanded by the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. By the 1960s, it stretched for roughly 200 kilometers, and it formed a web of narrow, interconnected passages beneath villages, fields, and jungle. These tunnels weren't a single straight corridor. They were a multi-leveled system with rooms, junctions, and vertical shafts. Descriptions talk about 3 main levels, an upper tier about 3 meters deep, a middle level around 5 to 6 meters down, and deeper sections approaching 10 meters in some places. Entrances were extremely small, and they were carefully camouflaged with leaves, soil, and vegetation. Some openings were hidden in house floors or within the roots of trees, and ventilation shafts were disguised as termite mounds or other natural features. Different sections served as kitchens, meeting rooms, infirmaries, storage areas, and sleeping quarters. Fighters could move weapons, documents, and supplies under the ground, bypassing any roads and patrol routes, and the network allowed a small group to appear suddenly near U.S. and South Vietnamese positions, carry out attacks, and disappear back into the tunnels. American and Allied forces recognized how important the tunnels were, and they launched major operations, including Operation Crimp and Operation Cedar Falls, to locate and destroy them. Heavy bombing, bulldozing, and efforts to pump gas or water into entrances all achieved only limited results. In many cases, the troops underestimated how far and deep the tunnels extended. Specialist tunnel rat teams were eventually formed to enter and map sections, but booby traps, dead ends, and false floors made the work extremely hazardous. Accounts from Vietnamese fighters describe shortages of air, food, and clean water, as well as infestations of insects and rodents down there, and U.S. soldiers coined the phrase "Black Echo" to describe the oppressive darkness and silence inside. After the war, many sections collapsed or were abandoned. Guides and on-site museums today explain how hidden passages were constructed and used, but the exact total length of every branch can't be mapped with complete certainty. But the layout, the existence, and the wartime role of the Cu Chi tunnels are extensively documented in military histories and on-site surveys. Number 15. The Secret Annex Bookcase Passage, the Netherlands. The canal house at Prinsengracht 263 in Amsterdam, now known as the Anne Frank House, contained a small but very real secret passage that separated its public offices from a concealed living space. Otto Frank's business occupied the front part of the building. Behind it stood a rear annex, a stack of the upper rooms that couldn't be seen from the street. And in 1940-41, a second staircase was added inside the building to connect the front section and the annex, creating an internal route that didn't require going outside. When the Frank family went into hiding in July of 1942, that internal connection became the critical access point. On the landing at the top office of the stairs, there was an ordinary-looking doorway leading towards the annex. In August of 1942, Otto Frank's colleague built a hinged bookcase to cover the opening completely. From the office side, it just looked to be a heavy, well-stocked shelf. In reality, it swung outwards like a door, revealing a low threshold and a narrow corridor leading into the hidden living space. Behind the bookcase, the passage itself was pretty short, but it was the only way in and out for 8 people in hiding. After stepping through the concealed doorways, you reached a small hall and a steep wooden staircase. One direction led to rooms occupied by the Frank family, and later by Fritz Pfeffer. Another led up to the floor where Van Pel's family stayed. Visitors today still duck under the same low beam and climb those same tight stairs, which give a very direct sense of how confined and vulnerable the route must have felt. Research from the Anne Frank house and related archives notes that even small noises in the annex could be heard in the warehouse if the building was quiet, which is why the physical separation provided by the passage and door was so important. On August 4, 1944, German and Dutch police raided the building after an unknown informant reported the hiding place. Witness accounts and later reconstructions indicate that the officers moved the bookcase aside to reach the annex. The passage did its job for just over 2 years, but it couldn't protect itself against betrayal. Unlike fictional hidden doors, every element of this passage, the carpentry, the staircase, the floor plan, it's documented in building plans and photographs. Its scale is modest, yeah, it's just a few steps and a sharp turn, but its role as a real, carefully engineered secret route to a hiding place during the Nazi occupation is beyond dispute. Number 14. Bran Castle's Secret Staircase, Romania. Bran Castle, it's on a rocky hill near the modern border between Transylvania and Wallachia. It was first built from a stone fortress in the late 14th century, mainly to guard a mountain pass and collect customs duties. For most of its history, it functioned as a defensive and administrative outpost. Only in the 20th century, when it became a royal residence, did one of its most famous hidden features come to light, a secret stairway concealed within the walls. The passage was discovered in the 1920s during renovations ordered by Queen Marie of Romania. Workers were modifying the interior to make the medieval fortress more comfortable. While removing part of the wall between rooms, they uncovered a narrow vertical shaft lined with stone steps. It ran inside the thickness of the castle walls, connecting a lower level, often described as the first floor Great Hall, with an upper room. Different descriptions vary slightly on which exact room it links, but they all agree that it allows movement between the 2 floors inside the masonry. At one end, the opening had been concealed by a built-in element, often described as a fireplace or a cupboard lining, so that visitors would only see solid stone or wood. At the other end, a door blended into the wall paneling, and when closed, both ends looked like normal parts of the room. This kind of concealment is consistent with other and early modern castles, where secret stairs were often used by lords or servants to move discreetly. What is less certain, though, is exactly when and why it was first constructed. Some historians suggest it dates back to the late medieval modifications, possibly to provide a protected route between a defensive level and a more private chamber. Others connect it to early modern changes when the fortress was adapted for more comfortable living. Today, though, visitors can walk through the doorway that was once hidden, climb the tight stone steps, and emerge in the higher room. Museum panels here emphasize the verified facts: the stair's existence within the wall, its rediscovery during Queen Marie's renovations, and its practical role in moving between floors unseen. Some popular stories sometimes link it to legends about Vlad III or Dracula, but those stories are largely literary and they're not supported by any solid evidence. The secret stair itself, however, is real, and it's a well-documented example of a hidden passage in a European castle. Number 13. Casa Loma's Service Tunnel in Canada. Casa Loma is a large Gothic revival mansion built on a hill in Toronto in Canada between 1911 and 1914 for businessman Sir Henry Palat. It was designed to resemble a European castle. It included not only grand public rooms and towers, but also a network of service spaces and practical infrastructure that visitors never saw. The most notable hidden route is an underground tunnel that links the main house to the stables and the carriage house located on the other side of the street. The tunnel runs for about 250 meters. It's often described as about 800 feet, passing beneath Austin Terrace. At the time of construction, the stables and carriage house were important parts of the castle, housing horses, vehicles, and later cars. Entrances were placed in the basement of the main house and within the stable complex, behind doors not obvious to casual visitors. It was finished with concrete walls and a slightly arched ceiling, wide enough for people and small utility vehicles, but not really ordinary carriage traffic. Pipes and conduits ran along its length, carrying services like heating lines and maybe electrical cables between the buildings. For staff, it functioned as a discreet corridor. They could move supplies, laundry, and equipment between the outbuildings and the main house without disturbing any guests. The goal was to separate the working parts of the estate from the formal, public areas. Visitors who arrived at the front entrance or attended events in the Great Hall rarely saw how food, fuel, or supplies were even moved around. The passage allowed that work to happen out of sight and out of the weather. During the Second World War, the outbuildings did play a role in a secret military research project related to anti-submarine detection. The stables and garages were adapted as laboratories and workshops. The tunnel, already in place, provided a sheltered link between parts of the complex. Today, the tunnel is open to the public as part of the Casa Loma tour. Visitors can walk the full length, see the old service pipes and displays about both the estate's early years and its wartime role, although now it's got lighting exhibits and safety features that were not originally there. It remains a genuine hidden service passage that's built into the house from the start and used for decades before most people in the city knew anything about it. Number 12. The Znojmo Catacomb Escape Passages in the Czech Republic. Beneath the center of Znojmo in South Moravia lies a sprawling labyrinth of underground passages and cellars known as the Znojmo Catacombs. This network began as individual storage cellars beneath townhouses in the 14th and 15th centuries. Over time, the owners and town authorities connected these spaces, carving tunnels through the bedrock until they formed an extensive multi-level system. Modern summaries usually describe roughly 25 to 30 kilometers of connected passages, in some places stacked up to 4 levels deep beneath the streets. These catacombs were built for practical reasons. Znojmo was an important fortified town exposed to threats from war and raids as well as repeated fires. Under each house, citizens dug cellars to store food, wine, and goods. When they linked these spaces, they gained not just storage, but a protected internal route that allowed them to move between buildings without going outside. In times of dangers, families could retreat below ground, locking or barricading the visible entrances while using hidden doors and tunnels to move around. Some parts of this system were designed very deliberately with defense in mind. Contemporary descriptions and surveys mention wells and cisterns within the tunnels so people could access water while sheltering. Ventilation shafts brought in fresh air, and in some places fireplaces in the cellars were connected to the house chimneys above. And that meant that the smoke appeared to rise from apparently empty or shuttered houses even when people were hidden below, making the town seem abandoned or ghostly to the attackers. For centuries after the end of any major military threat, the emphasis then shifted back to storage. The stable underground climate here made the catacombs ideal for keeping barrels of wine, and Xioma developed a reputation as a wine town. During the Second World War, sections of the tunnels were reportedly adapted as air raid shelters, continuing its defensive role for a new context. Today, though, a clearly defined route through part of the catacombs is open to visitors on guided tours. Safety measures and lighting has been added, but the basic passages, the low ceilings, and side cells remain as they were cut into the rock centuries ago. Not every meter of the system's been thoroughly mapped, though, and total length estimates can differ, but the catacombs' core function as a hidden defensive escape network beneath a fortified medieval town, it's well supported by surviving plans and municipal histories. Number 11. Mortimer's Hole Secret Tunnel. Nottingham Castle stands on a sandstone outcrop above the modern city, and that rock is riddled with artificial caves and tunnels. One of the best known is Mortimer's Hole, a man-made passage that climbs from the base of the rock up into the castle area. Today it's described as roughly a 90 to 100 meter tunnel cut through the sandstone with a steady upward slope, steps, and several bends. The tunnel's origin goes back to the medieval period, when Nottingham was a royal stronghold. Cutting concealed stairways into the soft rock allowed the defenders and trusted messengers to move between the castle interior and the town or riverside below without using the main gates. Mortimer's Hole appears to have served as one of these routes, linking the castle to the area known as the Brewhouse Yard at the bottom of the cliff. But the passage's fame comes from an episode in 1330 when King Edward III, still a young monarch, moved against his mother Isabella of France and her ally and probable lover, Roger Mortimer. Contemporary chroniclers and later accounts state that a small group of Edward's supporters entered Nottingham Castle at night through a secret subterranean way known only to the Castellan, and then surprised and captured Mortimer in his lodgings. The basic outline is this: a clandestine entry through an underground passage leading to the royal apartments is supported by multiple narrative sources. However, historians do point out that the exact tunnel used that night is not identified with complete certainty. The name Mortimer's Hole is now firmly attached to the long tunnel that tourist groups walk today, and it's a plausible candidate, but some researchers note that other shorter cave routes could also fit that description. Regardless of the precise connection to that single event, the tunnel itself is an authentic medieval or late medieval work. It's one of the more elaborate examples, engineered to climb from near river level up to the castle plateau, and its concealed lower entrance and relatively inconspicuous upper exit made it a practical hidden route rather than a public thoroughfare. Today, modern lighting and handrails have been added for safety, but the basic shape and alignment are the original. Visitors enter near the bottom of the rock and follow the same rising curve that the medieval users would have taken. Some of the romantic stories told about this passage, especially those that add some dramatic dialogue or specific bedroom scenes, go beyond what surviving records can support. Still though, it is real. It's a physically accessible secret tunnel beneath a royal fortress. Mortimer's Hole is a rare concrete example of the kind of hidden routes that often show up only as brief mentions in any medieval text. Number 10. Hezekiah's Tunnel in Jerusalem. Under the ancient city of David in Israel and Jerusalem runs a narrow, twisting water tunnel that was engineered as a hidden lifeline. Today it's known as Hezekiah's Tunnel or the Siloam Tunnel. It was cut through solid rock in the 8th century BCE. Its purpose was to bring water, which lay outside the city walls on the eastern slope, safely into the fortified interior at the Pool of Siloam. The tunnel's roughly half a kilometer long, about 530 meters, just wide enough for a person to walk through it while bent over, and the floor carries a channel of flowing water fed directly from a spring. At several points, the ceiling will dip low, forcing a modern visitor to crouch. The fact that it could be walked on from end to end rather than just being a narrow pipe made it accessible for inspection and maintenance, but it kept the water route completely hidden. A key piece of evidence for its construction comes from the Siloam inscription, a short text carved into a rock near the Pool of Siloam at the end of the tunnel. The inscription describes the moment when two teams of miners digging from opposite directions broke through the final barrier of rock and met in the middle. It notes that they had heard the sound of each other's picks through the stone and adjusted their course until they joined. There has been some scholarly debate about the exact dating and sequence of construction for all the waterworks around the city of David, including whether every associated pool and channel is from the Hezekiah region or if some elements were modified later. Those discussions revolve around radiocarbon samples, pottery finds, and stratigraphy, and scholars are open about areas where the evidence is not entirely conclusive. Today, Hezekiah's Tunnel is one of the best-known ancient passages that you can still walk. Visitors will enter at the Gihon Spring, step into calf-deep water, and follow the route by flashlight, emerging at the Pool of Siloam area, much as the ancient maintenance workers would have done. Number 9. The Tunnel of Eupalinos, Greece. On the Aegean island of Samos, another ancient rock-cut passage shows how early engineers use hidden tunnels for strategic infrastructure. The Tunnel of Eupalinos, built in the 6th century BCE during the rule of the tyrant Polycrates, is a remarkable underground aqueduct. Its job was to bring water from a spring on the inland side of the hill to the city entirely underground and out of sight. It's just over a kilometer long with a typical height of about 1.8 to 2 meters, allowing a person to walk upright through much of it. Along one side, a deeper channel was cut to carry the water, and while the remaining floor space served as a walkway for workers and inspectors, access was via discrete openings at each end. For anyone approaching from the sea or land, there would have been no obvious sign that the city's main water supply ran through the mountain. According to the ancient historian Herodotus, it was dug from both ends at once, a major surveying challenge in an era without modern instruments. The line isn't perfectly straight, of course. There are small dog legs and adjustments where the teams corrected course, but the fact that they connected at all is an example of careful planning and measurement. Still, though, the decision to place an aqueduct underground did have a strategic dimension. Samos, like other Greek city-states of the time, faced constant risk of attack. Any exposed or elevated aqueduct would have been vulnerable if an enemy wanted to cut off the water supply. At the same time, the tunnel provided a controlled, sheltered route where maintenance could be carried out in a relatively safe way. There is no serious doubt that the tunnel does date to the Archaic period and that it functioned as part of a larger water system that fed the city, and some technical aspects though, like exactly how the surveyors set out their initial line, or which mathematical methods they use, are still discussed in academic literature. Those debates though focus on the ingenuity of the design rather than on the basic authenticity. But walking through it, you see the original chisel marks, the graded floor, the water channel that was cut into the rock. It feels more like a long, narrow cave than a grand corridor. But that's precisely the point. It was meant to be unobtrusive and functional. As with Hezekiah's Tunnel, the Eupalinos passage shows how ancient builders used these hidden subterranean routes not just for dramatic escape, but for the practical and strategic problem of securing water in a vulnerable world. Number 8. The Bridge of Sighs and Secret Corridors, Italy. The Doge's Palace in Venice is full of hidden routes that allowed the city's rulers to move around without using the main staircases and courtyards. The most famous of these is the enclosed passage known as the Bridge of Sighs, which connects to the Palace of the New Prisons across a narrow canal. From the outside, it looks like a decorative stone bridge, but inside, it's a tightly controlled corridor with a small internal passage leading directly between interrogation rooms, offices, and cells. The bridge was built in the early 17th century after Venice constructed a purpose-built prison block opposite the palace. Until then, many prisoners were held in cramped cells within the palace itself, and this new arrangement required a secure link so prisoners could be moved between the courtrooms and the questioning chambers. The Bridge of Sighs is only one element in a wider network within the Doge's palace. Narrow staircases, attic-level walkways, and back corridors connect major rooms like the Great Council Chamber, the Senate Chamber, and various magistrates' offices. The routes allowed officials, scribes, and guards to move between sensitive spaces without crossing crowded halls. Above and behind the grand painted ceilings, roof spaces were adapted to hold archives and, in some periods, high-status prisoners. The secret itineraries that can be toured today do focus on the hidden circulation paths. Visitors are taken up tight staircases, behind plain doors, along wood-paneled corridors only wide enough for single file, and into small rooms where state inquisitors and magistrates once worked. Stories about the Bridge of Sighs do often emphasize romance or drama, particularly the idea that prisoners crossing it saw their last glimpse of Venice through its small windows. Those emotional interpretations can't be proved for specific individuals, and later writers undoubtedly added some color, but what is firmly established is the physical role of the bridge and the passages it connects. It's a fully enclosed hidden corridor used to move people securely between courtrooms and prison cells. Number 7. The Utilidor Tunnels of the Magic Kingdom in Florida. Beneath the Magic Kingdom theme park in Florida is a large service tunnel known as the Utilidors, short for utility corridors. These passages were built before the park's visible structures and then covered by earth, so that what visitors think of as ground level is actually the first floor sitting on top of the tunnel network. The result is a hidden layer underneath the park, where staff, equipment, and supplies move around without being seen on these themed streets above. They're laid out on roughly a ring-shaped plan with cross-connections that are similar to simple underground road systems. With main wide corridors, they allow small electric vehicles and carts to pass, while side passages lead to storage rooms, kitchens, and wardrobe departments. Access points are located inside buildings around the park, behind doors marked for employees, so that workers can appear in the correct area without crossing through the other themed zones in costume that really wouldn't fit. The tunnels also do carry a dense concentration of services. Utility conduits for electricity, telecommunications, and other systems run along the ceilings and walls, and in the early decades of the park, a vacuum-powered trash disposal system moved waste through the underground pipes from collection points in the park. Food merchandise and clean costumes travel through the utilidors to restock outlets above, again without needing any visible delivery route. The existence of the utilidors has never really been completely secret. Theme park guides and books and official tours have described them for decades, but their internal layout and details of operation are really not generally accessible to ordinary people. Parts of the system can be seen on special behind-the-scenes tours where groups walk through sections of the tunnels and see costuming, support areas, and infrastructure up close, and other areas remain restricted. Unlike many historic secret passages, the utilidor system was documented from the start in engineering drawings. There is no doubt about where it runs or what it's used for. What makes it fit into this category of hidden passages is its deliberate separation from a public space. It's a full network of underground corridors built specifically so the visible park above could appear seamless and self-contained. Number 6. Edinburgh's Vault Passages in Scotland. Under the arches of Edinburgh's South Bridge lies a network of enclosed chambers and connecting passages that's often referred to collectively as the Edinburgh Vaults. The bridge, completed in the 1780s, was built with a row of arches that supported a long elevated roadway. The spaces within those arches were originally intended for workshops, storage, and commercial units. At first, the vaults served a practical purpose. Tradespeople stored tools and materials there, and some small businesses operated in the dry upper rooms. But drainage and ventilation were poor and water seeped through the masonry. As a result, many of the legal tenants abandoned the vaults within a few decades, leaving behind a dark, damp, and largely forgotten set of spaces beneath South Bridge. Over time, these abandoned vaults became an unofficial refuge for some of Edinburgh's poorest residents and for illicit activity. Historical references from the 19th century note that parts of the vaults were used by displaced families, immigrant workers, and unregulated trades. Because the entrances were unmarked or hidden, the passages formed kind of a semi-secret undercity. Narrow stairways and short corridors linked one room to another, and people familiar with the layout could move quietly between chambers without being noticed by the world above. The passages themselves are simple but easily concealed. Many were blocked or filled in with rubble when the vaults were officially closed off, and only careful excavation revealed them. Today, several sections are open for guided tours while others remain inaccessible. You can walk through the hidden corridors, see the bricked-up doorways, and follow routes that once connected dozens of chambers. Although legends sometimes claim smugglers or criminals used them, surviving historical documentation is clearer about the vault's role as an improvised housing and workspace. Still, though, the very structure of the bridge created a genuine set of hidden passages, reachable only through unmarked stairways and internal doorways. Number 5. The Post Office Railway, London. Deep beneath central London is a small-scale underground railway designed specifically to transport the mail, the Post Office Railway, more commonly known as Mail Rail. Built in the early 20th century, it opened in 1927 and operated for nearly 80 years. While it wasn't a secret in the strictest sense, its existence was publicly known. It did function as a hidden, inaccessible set of passages. The tunnels are about 6.5 miles, that's about 10.5 kilometers long, running from an arc from Paddington in the west to Whitechapel in the east. They're only large enough for narrow, driverless electric trains that carried mail in small wagons, and access points to the tunnels were located inside secure facilities, so neither commuters nor pedestrians would ever see an entrance from street level. During its operational years, though, the mail rail functioned continuously, with trains running automatically under the city. They housed maintenance walks, cable routes, and switching points, effectively forming a hidden infrastructure layer beneath London. For anyone walking above, you'd never know it was there, impossible to detect. As technology and logistics changed, the Post Office Railway became less cost-effective, and it closed in 2003. After the closure, the tunnels remained silent, with trains just sitting on their tracks in the dark. Large parts of the network were left exactly as they were on the last day of service, making them kind of a time capsule of early 20th century engineering. And although the mail rail was never designed as a clandestine escape route or a wartime shelter, it does fit within this category of hidden passages. Number 4. The Forbidden City's secret Meridian Gate corridors in Beijing. The Forbidden City in Beijing. It contains more than just ceremonial halls and courtyards. It also has a network of concealed corridors designed to let the emperor and his staff move discreetly. The most notable of these is the hidden side passages adjacent to the Meridian Gate, Wumen, the southern entrance of the palace complex. From the outside, the gate presents a massive wall and 5 openings, but inside the structure are narrow stairways, upper-level walkways, and lateral corridors that were not accessible to ordinary palace personnel. The passage served 2 main purposes. First, they protected the emperor's security. In the Ming and Qing dynasties, emperors were expected to appear only at specific times and in carefully choreographed ceremonies. By using these internal staircases and walkways, the emperor could reach the top platform of the Meridian Gate or other adjacent structures without crossing any open courtyards where visibility was difficult to control. Within the thickness of the towers are these small stairways and storage rooms that functioned as transition points. These spaces weren't secret in the sense of being unknown to palace insiders, but they were completely off-limits to anyone without a very high clearance. Records describe several instances where the emperor used the concealed corridors to reach the viewing balcony on the Meridian Gate, and from that position, edicts were proclaimed and punishments were sometimes announced. Additionally, internal ramps and back corridors linked the Meridian Gate to the Gate of Supreme Harmony, which created a secure spine for palace movement during any major ceremonies. Today, portions of these hidden passages are still restricted or only partially open during special tours. Visitors typically walk through the central archway, unaware that above and around them are concealed corridors that were once used by emperors, eunuchs, guards, and ritual functionaries. These tunnels represent a genuine example of hidden movement channels built directly into the fabric of one of the world's largest imperial complexes. Number 3. The Cheyenne Mountain Blast Tunnel in Colorado. Cheyenne Mountain, near Colorado Springs, houses a Cold War-era military installation built to withstand external threats. Inside the mountain, engineers constructed a grid of tunnels and chambers for what became the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. While the existence of the base has long been publicly acknowledged, many of its internal access routes were intentionally hidden from outside view, most notably the reinforced blast tunnel leading from the exterior blast doors into the underground complex. The entrance is located behind a pair of large steel blast doors set into the mountainside. Once these doors close, a tunnel about 150 meters long leads inward, sloping gently and opening into a series of connecting corridors and access points. Its angled shape and reinforced lining did minimize any transmission of destructive force towards the operations center deeper in the mountain. Beyond the main blast tunnel is an interior network of corridors that connect multiple steel-framed buildings mounted on these giant springs. These buildings contain command centers, communication hubs, living quarters, and support rooms. The entire complex is shielded by thousands of feet of granite, with the tunnels providing controlled circulation routes for staff and equipment. The tunnel's role wasn't merely logistical. Even if the exterior of the mountain experienced extreme blast forces, the interior corridors were intended to protect the command center so it could remain functional. And since 2008, NORAD's primary day-to-day operations have mostly moved to Peterson Space Force Base, but Cheyenne Mountain does remain active as a hardened backup, and it houses various defense and monitoring systems. However, the majority of the passage network is still restricted for obvious national security reasons. Its restricted access and its function as a protected route connecting the outside world with a fortified core facility, the engineering principles behind it, shock absorption, secure circulation, and controlled entry, reflect a 20th century interpretation of the same idea that are found in ancient fortresses: create a passage that can't easily be found, breached, or disabled. Number 2. The Winchester House in San Jose, California. The Winchester Mystery House is known for its unusual architecture, but many of its strangest features weren't merely whimsical. Several served as intentional hidden or confusing passages. Built and continually expanded by Sarah Winchester from 1884 until her death in 1922, the mansion contains more than 160 rooms, multiple floors, and a layout that seems designed to allow movement without being easily tracked. One of the best-known hidden routes is a narrow cabinet-like door in the main bedroom that opens into a small passage behind the walls. This passage connects to the house's upper stories and servant areas, enabling someone to move between the floors without using any visible hallway. Other passages include stairways that rise up into the ceilings, doors that open into solid walls, and hallways that narrow and twist before just ending abruptly. A notable example is the so-called hallway maze near the center of the house. This section includes intersecting hallways, tight corners, and small doors that are positioned at varying heights. Architectural surveys show that many of the passages were just used to route plumbing, chimneys, or structural supports, but several of the connecting doors and back corridors were built deliberately to give access between wings of the mansion. In practice, this created a semi-hidden internal network known only to the staff and those who designed the house. The house contains a number of secretive escape-style routes too, like trapdoor in the floor leading to a concealed landing on a lower staircase, and passages hidden behind wall panels. These weren't constructed for emergency escape in the military sense, but served as a separate private and service movement in a large, continuously expanding residence. Earthquake damage in 1906 caused portions of the house to collapse or become blocked, and some small passages were later sealed for safety. But today, guided tours point out several of the real passages, including the narrow doorways tucked behind heavy curtains, small crawlspace-like connectors, and back staircases that squeezed into the irregular geometry of this weird building. While the myths about the house being designed to confuse the spirits, lack of evidence and documented structural facts do confirm that the mansion includes authentic hidden passages that were used for movement and maintenance. But who knows, there might be some spirits that are left lost in those corridors. Number 1. The Paris Catacombs Restricted Passages, France. Beneath Paris is an immense network of former limestone quarries, commonly referred to as the Paris Catacombs. Only a small, curated portion is open to the public. The majority consists of miles of restricted tunnels, side chambers, and connecting passages that form one of the largest underground networks in Europe. These passages were carved from the Middle Ages onward, as stone was extracted to build the growing city. Over the centuries, empty quarries merged into a complex of corridors and intersecting levels, much of which is about 20 to 30 meters below the surface. In the late 18th century, when city cemeteries were becoming overcrowded, officials began transferring human remains into part of this quarry network. This ossuary, now the famous public catacombs, represents only a fraction of the underground system. The rest remains off-limits due to safety concerns. These forbidden passages extend well over 200 kilometers by most modern estimates, though exact measurements vary. They form a hidden grid of sorts beneath any major boulevard, residential area, and even historic landmarks. Some sections contain old inspection rooms, carved markers showing directions or date of excavation, and vertical shafts that once served as ventilation routes. The city maintains an inspection service responsible for monitoring the stability of the passages. Their maps and surveys do confirm the extent and structure of this hidden network. While the agency allows for scientific access, most of the tunnels remain closed. Unauthorized entry is illegal, yet so-called cataphiles have been known to explore sections of the network. Their reports, though unofficial, often match what is known from the formal surveys, but because they're informal, they're not used as any authoritative source. The hidden passages of the catacombs did also play a role in history. During the French Resistance in World War II, some groups reportedly used parts of the underground for meetings and movement, though the exact routes are only partially documented. In other periods, quarry workers carved out inspection corridors and support pillars, and those practical uses are supported by engineering records too. Today, the Paris Catacombs represent one of the most extensive networks of restricted hidden passages. Visitors walking through the official ossuary tour see only a tiny fraction of what lies below. Beyond the marked paths in the dark forms a hidden underworld that reflects centuries of quarrying, urban planning, and maintenance work beneath the modern French capital.